The first thing everyone noticed about Emily Carter wasn't her medical knowledge. It was the navy blue scrubs. To most people walking through Jefferson Middle School each morning, those scrubs meant one thing: she was just the nurse. Teachers greeted her politely before hurrying toward their classrooms. Parents smiled as they signed children into the front office. Students stopped by her clinic, mostly for scraped knees, headaches, forgotten inhalers, or the occasional upset stomach. Very few people thought of Emily as someone who protected lives. They thought of security officers for that, or police officers, or firefighters. The school nurse was simply there to hand out ice packs and Band-Aids. At least, that's what they believed. On a chilly Tuesday morning in October, that belief would change forever, because before the day was over, one quiet nurse would recognize something that everyone else missed. And according to investigators later, that single observation prevented what could have become one of the worst school tragedies in the county's history. This is the story of the nurse they underestimated, the woman who stayed calm while everyone else panicked, the woman who trusted her instincts, and the woman who proved that saving lives doesn't always require a badge. Sometimes it requires paying attention. Jefferson Middle School sat in a quiet suburban neighborhood surrounded by maple trees that had begun turning orange and crimson. Nearly 900 students attended the school. Every weekday morning looked almost identical. School buses lined the curb. Parents dropped off sleepy children. Teachers carried coffee cups through the front entrance. Inside the nurse's office, Emily had already been working for nearly an hour before the first bell rang. She checked emergency medications, reviewed allergy lists, prepared insulin supplies for diabetic students, made sure every emergency bag was stocked. She had followed the exact same routine for nearly 12 years, not because anyone told her to, because routines saved lives. Emily had worked in emergency medicine before becoming a school nurse. Years spent inside busy trauma centers had taught her something that never left her. Disasters rarely announced themselves. Small details usually came first. An unusual smell, someone acting differently, a tiny inconsistency everyone else ignored. Experience had taught her to notice what didn't belong. Around 8:15 that morning, students filled the hallways. Lockers slammed shut, while friends laughed. Announcements echoed through classroom speakers. Everything seemed perfectly ordinary, until a sixth-grade boy named Noah entered the nurse's office. He wasn't sick. "I think I forgot my lunch," he said nervously. Emily smiled. "It happens." "I know." He hesitated, then looked over his shoulder toward the hallway. "Can I stay here for a minute?" Emily looked up from her paperwork. Something about his face caught her attention. Oh, he wasn't pale. He wasn't feverish. He wasn't injured. He was frightened, not the ordinary nervousness children sometimes carried. Real fear. "What happened?" Noah shrugged. "Nothing." "You sure?" He nodded too quickly. Children rarely lied well, especially frightened ones. Emily had spent over a decade reading faces. This one bothered her. "You don't have to tell me if you're not ready," she said gently. "But if something's wrong, I need to know." He stared at the floor, then quietly whispered, "Some 8th graders were talking." "What about?" "I don't know." He swallowed. "They said, today's gonna be unforgettable." Emily waited. They were laughing. "Kids joke about things all the time," she replied carefully. "I know. But..." His voice dropped even lower. "They weren't joking." Emily thanked him for telling her. He returned to class. She made a brief note. Nothing alarming. Not yet. Middle school students often made dramatic comments. Most meant absolutely nothing. Still, something about the boy's expression stayed with her. 10 minutes later, another student arrived complaining of stomach pain. Emily examined her. No fever, normal pulse, likely anxiety. "What happened this morning?" The girl hesitated. "I don't know." Then she quietly asked, "Can my mom pick me up early today?" "Why?" "I just don't feel good." Emily noticed something else. The girl kept glancing toward the hallway, almost expecting someone to appear. Again, fear. By lunchtime, 4 different students had visited her office. Different complaints. Headache, nausea, dizziness, but every conversation shared one unusual detail. Each child seemed distracted, uneasy, watching the hallway. Emily had seen this before, not during medical emergencies, during investigations. Years earlier, she'd worked alongside detectives after a hospital evacuation caused by a suspicious package. Patients hadn't known exactly what was happening, but they sensed something. Fear spreads long before facts do. She picked up the phone and called the assistant principal. "Anything unusual today?" "No." "You sure?" He laughed. "Besides 8th graders being 8th graders." Emily smiled politely. "I've had several anxious students." "Probably a math test." "Maybe." After hanging up, she tried convincing herself that was all it was. But her instincts refused to settle. At 11:42 a.m., everything changed. A custodian entered the clinic carrying a small cardboard box. "You expecting supplies?" Emily looked up. "No. It was sitting outside your office." "No label." He shook his head. "No shipping sticker. No return address. Nothing." She stared at the box. Plain brown cardboard, ordinary packing tape, no writing whatsoever. The custodian chuckled. Probably somebody's science project. Maybe, but one thing immediately bothered her. Deliveries never arrived that way, not once in 12 years. And then, she noticed something even stranger. The box wasn't addressed to anyone. It had simply been left beside the hallway wall, as if someone wanted it found, but didn't want anyone knowing who had left it. Emily didn't touch the box. Instead, she studied it from where she stood. Years in emergency medicine had trained her to slow down when everyone else wanted to hurry. Panic led people to make mistakes. Observation saved lives. She crouched several feet away. The cardboard looked brand new. No dents, no postage, no delivery company logo, no handwriting, nothing to identify where it had come from. The custodian shrugged. "Should I put it in lost and found?" Emily didn't answer immediately. "Did you see who left it?" "No." "Was anyone nearby?" He shook his head. "I found it leaning against the wall outside your office." "How long had it been there?" "Couldn't have been more than 5 or 10 minutes." Emily looked toward the hallway. Students were changing classes. Hundreds of children streamed through the corridors, laughing, talking, carrying backpacks. Nobody seemed to notice the plain cardboard box sitting only a few feet away. That, somehow, made it more unsettling. If a student had forgotten it, someone would usually come back looking for it. If it belonged to a teacher, it would almost certainly have a shipping label. If it were school supplies, the office staff would have signed for the delivery. Nothing about it fit. "Leave it here," she finally said. The custodian nodded and walked away. Emily picked up the office phone. The school secretary answered. "Did we receive any deliveries this morning?" She checked. "Just cafeteria supplies." "Anything for the health office?" "No." "What about maintenance?" "No." Emily thanked her. Then she called the front office. "Has anyone reported a missing package?" "No." "Any parents dropping something off?" "Nothing today." She slowly hung up. Still, none of that proved anything. A misplaced box wasn't exactly an emergency. She knew how dangerous assumptions could be. If she overreacted, she'd create unnecessary panic. If she ignored it, she didn't want to finish that thought. Her eyes drifted back to Noah's frightened face from that morning. Today's gonna be unforgettable. She remembered the anxious girl asking to go home, the 4 nervous students, the unusual tension throughout the building. Individually, each detail meant very little. Together, they formed a picture she couldn't ignore. Emily opened the emergency contact binder on her desk. Inside was a page she'd reviewed dozens of times during annual safety training. Suspicious package procedures. Most staff barely glanced at it during training sessions. Emily had read every line, twice. She picked up the phone again. This time she called assistant principal, David Morales. "Can you come to the clinic? Everything okay?" "I'd rather show you." His voice remained relaxed. "I'll be there in a minute." 3 minutes later, he stepped into the office carrying a clipboard. "You found treasure," he joked. Emily pointed toward the box. "Do you recognize it?" He looked. "No, it wasn't delivered. Maybe somebody left it. There's no name." He leaned closer. So, Emily calmly explained everything. The anxious students, the strange comments, the unclaimed package, the lack of shipping information. David listened patiently. When she finished, he folded his arms. You think they're connected? I don't know. You think it's dangerous? I don't know. He smiled politely. I appreciate being cautious. So do I. But right now all we have is a cardboard box. Emily nodded. He wasn't wrong. Evidence mattered, not feelings. Still. I'd like you to call the district security office. David hesitated. They'll think we're overreacting. Maybe. And if we're wrong? Emily looked directly at him. If we're wrong, everyone goes home safely. He was quiet. Then he sighed. You really think something's off? I do. David stared at the box another few seconds. Finally, he reached for his radio. This is the assistant principal. His voice remained calm. Can security come to the health office? No urgency, no panic, just a routine request. Emily appreciated that. Within 5 minutes, the school's security officer arrived. Officer Mark Reynolds had worked school security for nearly 15 years. He'd handled fights, medical emergencies, missing students, fire alarms, false reports. He'd also responded to dozens of suspicious package calls. Every single one had turned out to be harmless. He listened carefully as Emily explained her concerns. When she finished, he smiled reassuringly. You did the right thing calling. He approached the box cautiously. Without touching it, he circled around it. Then something caught his attention. He stopped, bent down, and frowned. What is it? David asked. Officer Reynolds pointed toward one corner of the box, a tiny hole, barely larger than the tip of a pencil, almost invisible unless someone looked closely. Emily felt her heartbeat quicken. What do you see? The officer didn't answer immediately. Instead, he leaned back, much farther back. Then he quietly said something that instantly changed the atmosphere inside the room. I'm not touching this. The joking disappeared. The relaxed smiles vanished. Even David's expression changed. Officer Reynolds reached for his radio. His voice remained controlled, but Emily heard something she'd never heard from him before. Urgency. I need district security immediately. He paused, then added 4 words. Possible credible threat. Silence filled the room. No one spoke. No one moved. Outside the office, hundreds of children continue walking through the hallways, completely unaware that, only a few feet away, adults had just begun treating an ordinary cardboard box as something potentially deadly. Emily looked at the clock. 11:57 a.m. Lunch periods had already started, the busiest part of the school day. And if her instincts were right, they had very little time left. Officer Reynolds never raised his voice. He didn't need to. Years of training had taught him that calm spread just as quickly as panic. He stepped backward until he was several yards from the package. Then he looked at Emily. Close this office. She immediately locked the clinic door leading into the hallway. David stood frozen. What do we do? Officer Reynolds answered without hesitation. We assume it's real until someone proves otherwise. He pressed the radio button again. Dispatch, notify district security, and request immediate law enforcement response. A brief pause, then came the reply. Copy, units en route. Emily glanced through the narrow window in her office door. Students were still moving between lunch periods, laughing, talking, completely unaware. That innocence made the moment even heavier. One wrong decision, one careless action, could put hundreds of children at risk. Officer Reynolds turned toward David. I need the emergency operations binder. David hurried from the room. Emily stopped him. Don't run. He looked confused. If students see you running, they'll panic. He nodded. She was right. Everything depended on keeping the building calm. David forced himself to walk, fast, but not fast enough to attract attention. The hallway remained orderly, exactly as it should. Officer Reynolds pulled out his phone and quietly called 911 directly. This is Jefferson Middle School. He gave the address. We have a suspicious package inside the building. He carefully described what they'd found. No, we have not touched it. Yes, students are still inside. He listened for several seconds, then answered, "Understood." When he hung up, Emily asked, "What did they say?" "They're sending bomb technicians." "How long?" "They're coming as fast as they can." She knew what that really meant. Nobody could promise how quickly they'd arrive, which meant the responsibility belonged to the people already inside the school. Officer Reynolds looked at the clock. 12:01 p.m. "We're evacuating," David returned, carrying the emergency procedures binder. "The principal's in a meeting across town." "I'll notify him," David said. "No." Officer Reynolds shook his head. "First we move the kids." Emily agreed. Every second counted. The challenge wasn't deciding whether to evacuate, it was how. 900 students couldn't simply stampede toward the exits. That would create a disaster, even if the package turned out to be harmless. Children could be trampled. Teachers could lose accountability. Parents would hear rumors before facts. Chaos could spread faster than any real threat. Emily opened the school's emergency plan. She had reviewed it every semester, never expecting to actually use it. There it was. Suspicious package protocol. Do not activate the fire alarm unless directed. Avoid hallways near the suspected device. Move occupants away in controlled stages. Maintain accountability. Prevent panic. Simple words on paper, much harder in real life. Officer Reynolds studied the school map. The package sat near the east hallway. That eliminated 2 primary exits. He pointed. "We move everyone west." David nodded. "I'll start with the cafeteria." Emily interrupted. "No." Both men looked at her. If teachers suddenly tell everyone to leave, students will ask questions. So, if one child yells, "Bomb," she didn't need to finish. Middle school students would do the rest. Within seconds, hundreds could start running. Officer Reynolds understood immediately. "So what's your idea?" Emily thought for only a moment. "Tell teachers we're conducting an unscheduled safety relocation because of a maintenance issue." David frowned. "They'll believe that. They don't have to believe it. They only have to stay calm." Officer Reynolds gave a small smile. "Good." He picked up his radio. "Attention, staff." His voice remained steady. "We're initiating a controlled building relocation due to a facilities concern. Teachers, please escort students to the West Athletic Field using your designated routes. No running. Bring attendance sheets. Further instructions will follow." The message lasted less than 20 seconds. Inside classrooms, teachers exchanged puzzled looks. A facilities concern? Some assumed a broken water pipe. Others thought someone smelled natural gas. A few guessed another fire drill. Whatever the reason, they followed instructions, exactly as they had practiced, one classroom at a time. Students stood, collected backpacks, formed orderly lines. Emily watched from the clinic window. Everything looked surprisingly normal. That was exactly what she wanted. In the cafeteria, lunch monitors quietly redirected students toward alternate exits. No shouting, no alarms, just calm voices. "This way, everyone." Outside, buses were moved away from the building. Teachers counted students. Office staff printed attendance lists. The school secretary began calling district administrators. Within minutes, police cars arrived. No sirens. They parked several blocks away. Exactly as instructed, the responding officers approached on foot. One entered through the west entrance. Another met Officer Reynolds in the hallway. Emily overheard only fragments. "Where is it?" "East corridor. Device hasn't been disturbed. Students evacuating." Then came another question. "Who reported it?" Officer Reynolds pointed toward Emily. "The nurse." The officer looked surprised. "She noticed it." She noticed everything. Emily tried to ignore the conversation. There wasn't time to think about recognition. She had another responsibility. Several medically fragile students still remained inside. One used a wheelchair, another relied on portable oxygen. 2 diabetic students were eating lunch in separate locations. Evacuation plans looked neat on paper. Reality was always messier. "I'll get them," Emily said. Officer Reynolds turned sharply. "No. They're my patients. The building may not be safe. They can't evacuate alone." For a moment, neither spoke. Finally, the officer nodded once. "You have 3 minutes." Emily didn't wait. She grabbed the emergency medical backpack from beside her desk. Inside were insulin supplies, emergency medications, bandages, gloves, an automated external defibrillator battery. Years of preparation packed into one bag. She slung it over her shoulder. As she opened the clinic door, Officer Reynolds called after her. "If anything changes, leave immediately." Emily nodded, then stepped into the hallway. The corridor, once filled with noise, now echoed with distant footsteps. Most classrooms were already empty. Lockers stood open. Loose papers drifted across the floor from students rushing to leave. The silence felt unnatural. She moved quickly toward the special education wing, not running, not hesitating. Halfway there, she heard something unexpected, a voice, very faint, coming from farther down the hallway. Not a teacher, not an officer, a student. Crying. Emily stopped. The evacuation was nearly complete. So why was there still a child somewhere inside the building? Emily stood perfectly still. The crying came again. Soft. Broken. Somewhere near the science classrooms. Every instinct told her to keep moving toward the special education wing. The medically fragile students depended on her, but no evacuation plan ever worked exactly as written. Children became separated. They hid. They froze, especially when they were frightened. Emily spoke into her portable radio. "Officer Reynolds," his voice answered immediately. "Go ahead. I hear a student crying in the east hallway." A brief silence, then, "I'm sending an officer." Emily looked down the corridor. The crying sounded closer now. "No." She tightened her grip on the medical backpack. "I already have eyes on the area." "Emily, I'll be 30 seconds. Another pause. Finally, 30 seconds. She moved toward the sound. Every classroom door stood open. Desks sat exactly where students had left them. Half-finished math problems covered whiteboards. Lunch trays still rested on a few desks. Everything looked frozen in time. The crying became louder. Emily rounded the corner. There, a little girl, no older than 11, curled into a ball beside a row of lockers, hands covering her ears. Backpack lying several feet away. Emily immediately recognized her. Sophia, a 6th grader. Severe anxiety disorder. Emily had treated her countless times after panic attacks. "Sophia." The girl didn't respond. "Sophia, it's Emily." Nothing. Her breathing was rapid, shoulders trembling uncontrollably. Emily slowly knelt several feet away. She didn't rush forward. With panic attacks, rushing often made things worse. "Sophia." A tiny movement. The girl looked up. Tears streamed down her face. "I can't." Her voice cracked. "I can't move." Emily kept her voice calm. "You don't have to move yet." Sophia shook her head violently. "My legs won't work." Emily knew that feeling. Panic could make people feel completely trapped. Their bodies simply refused to cooperate. She glanced at her watch. 12:08 p.m. Time was slipping away. "Sophia." The girl finally looked directly at her. "I need you to listen to my voice." "I can't." "You can." Emily took one slow breath. "Can you copy me?" Sophia hesitated. Then, she inhaled. Too quickly. Emily smiled gently. "Good. Now slower. Another breath. Better. Again." 30 seconds passed, then 60. The girl's breathing gradually became more controlled. Emily stretched out her hand. "I'm not going to pull you. I'm just going to help you stand." Sophia stared at the hand. "What if I fall?" "I'll catch you." "What if I can't walk?" "Then we'll walk together." "What if?" Emily interrupted softly. "What if you can?" The girl blinked. Nobody had asked her that. Very slowly, Sophia reached forward. Their hands met. Emily applied only enough pressure to steady her. Nothing more. Sophia stood. Her knees shook violently. But she stayed upright. "There you go." "I don't think I can keep standing." "You don't have to do it alone." Emily wrapped one arm gently around her shoulders. "We'll take one step." Sophia managed it. "Perfect." Another step, then another. The hallway suddenly crackled with radio traffic. "Officer Reynolds to all units. His voice sounded sharper now. "Bomb squad is 2 minutes out." Emily's heart skipped. Only 2 minutes. She picked up the pace slightly, not enough to frighten Sophia, just enough to keep moving. As they approached the intersection leading toward the west exits, Emily saw another problem. One of the special education aides was pushing Michael's wheelchair, but the chair had stopped. One wheel refused to turn. The aide struggled to force it forward. "It won't move." Emily hurried over. "What happened?" "I don't know." The front caster had twisted sideways and jammed against its mounting bracket. Michael looked terrified. "Am I going to be left?" "No." Emily knelt beside the wheel. She'd repaired enough hospital equipment over the years to recognize simple mechanical problems. She lifted the front slightly, twisted the caster. It refused to move. Again, still stuck. The aide looked ready to panic. Emily wasn't. She leaned her full weight into the chair. The caster suddenly snapped back into position. The wheel spun freely. "There," the aide pushed. This time the wheelchair rolled smoothly. Michael smiled with obvious relief. "Thank you," Emily smiled back. "We're almost outside." They continued moving. Students had nearly cleared the building. Teachers waited at exits, counting children as they emerged. Police officers directed everyone toward the athletic field. Everything was still orderly, remarkably orderly. Then, a voice echoed through the hallway. "Emily!" Officer Reynolds came running toward them. This time, he wasn't walking calmly anymore. His face had completely changed. "What happened?" Emily asked. "The bomb squad intercepted a phone call." She stared at him. "What phone call?" "Someone claimed the device is real." The words landed like a punch. Not a rumor, not speculation, an actual threat. Officer Reynolds looked at Michael, then Sophia, then Emily. "We're out of time." Without another word, he grabbed the back of Michael's wheelchair. Emily tightened her hold on Sophia. Together, they ran for the west exit as fast as they safely could. Behind them, the hallway they had just crossed disappeared into an eerie, suffocating silence. No voices, no footsteps. Only the sound of 4 people racing against a clock none of them could see. Cold air hit Emily's face the moment they burst through the west doors. Outside, the athletic field had transformed into something almost unrecognizable. Hundreds of students stood in carefully organized rows. Teachers called attendance. Police officers established a growing security perimeter. School buses were being moved farther away from the campus. Parents had already begun arriving. No one knew exactly what was happening. Rumors spread in whispers. Gas leak, electrical fire, chemical spill. Nobody had said the word bomb, not yet. Officer Reynolds helped push Michael's wheelchair across the grass until they reached the special education teachers. "You've got him." "We've got him." Emily released a slow breath. Sophia still clung tightly to her arm. "I don't want you to leave." "I'm not leaving." Emily crouched beside her. "I just need to help a few more people." Sophia nodded reluctantly. A teacher gently wrapped a blanket around the frightened girl. Emily immediately turned toward the command post, forming near the parking lot. Several patrol vehicles surrounded a white utility truck marked County Bomb Squad. 2 technicians climbed out wearing heavy protective gear. Their movements were calm, deliberate. One carried a portable X-ray system. The other wheeled a remote-controlled robot toward the building. Officer Reynolds met them halfway. Emily overheard the briefing. "Package located outside the nurse's office. No one touched it. Building evacuated. Student accountability still underway." One technician nodded. "Good." He looked toward the school. "We'll take it from here." The robot disappeared through the west entrance. Everyone watched. Nobody spoke. The machine moved slowly across the empty hallways, transmitting live video back to a monitor inside the command vehicle. Emily found herself staring at the screen. The familiar corridors now looked hauntingly different, deserted, silent. The robot turned the corner. There it was, the backpack, still sitting exactly where she'd first seen it. Nothing had changed. One technician adjusted the camera. Zoom. The image sharpened. Black backpack, partially unzipped, wires visible, a small electronic display. Officer Reynolds quietly muttered, "That's no accident." The technician didn't answer. He simply continued examining every angle. The robot stopped several feet away. A mechanical arm extended, not to touch the bag, only to position the portable X-ray panel behind it. Another device emitted a brief pulse. Seconds later, an image appeared on the monitor. Emily wasn't an explosives expert, but she immediately knew one thing. This wasn't a forgotten school bag. Inside were several dense, rectangular objects, multiple wires, a battery pack, and what looked disturbingly similar to a timing circuit. Nobody spoke for nearly 10 seconds. Finally, the senior technician looked at Officer Reynolds. "It's viable." Emily frowned. "What does that mean?" He answered without taking his eyes off the screen. "It means this device appears capable of functioning." The words settled over everyone like heavy smoke. Officer Reynolds immediately picked up his radio. "Expand the perimeter. Double it." Officers began moving teachers and students farther across the athletic fields. Parents who had gathered near the entrance were pushed back another 100 yards. No arguments, no complaints. One look at the officers' faces was enough. Emily looked around. Many students had begun noticing the increased police activity. Questions multiplied. "So, why are they moving us? When can we go home? Where's my backpack?" Teachers continued reassuring them, but anxiety spread. Emily spotted a young boy sitting alone on the grass, head buried in his knees. She recognized him, Liam, type 1 diabetic. His lunch had been interrupted during the evacuation. She immediately checked her watch. He was overdue for his scheduled blood sugar test. She walked over. "Liam," he looked up. "I left my insulin." "I know. It's inside." "I know. What do I do?" Emily unzipped her emergency medical backpack. "This is exactly why we keep backup supplies." She checked his glucose level, higher than normal, not dangerous yet, but rising. She prepared his insulin carefully. "You remembered everything." Emily smiled. "We prepare for bad days before they happen." Liam nodded. "I thought you'd forget." "I don't forget my patients." Nearby, another teacher waved her over. A student with asthma was beginning to wheeze. Emily immediately grabbed an inhaler from the emergency kit. Then, another child scraped his knee while sitting on the pavement. A frightened first grader began crying because she couldn't find her older brother. For the next 20 minutes, Emily barely stopped moving. Even outside the danger zone, she was still the school nurse, still solving problems, still calming fears, still making sure every child felt seen. Officer Reynolds watched her from across the field. One of the younger officers approached him. "She's been everywhere." Reynolds nodded. "That's what nurses do." Back inside the school, the bomb robot slowly advanced toward the backpack. A water disruption device was attached to its mechanical arm. The technician spoke quietly. "We'll attempt remote disruption." Another officer asked, "If it detonates?" "It detonates." Everyone stepped farther back. Even from outside, tension became almost unbearable. The technician pressed a button. The robot positioned itself precisely. 3, 2, 1. A loud blast echoed through the building, not an explosion. The controlled discharge from the disruption device. Everyone instinctively ducked. Dust drifted from several classroom windows. Silence followed. The technician leaned closer to the monitor. Then his expression changed. The timer stopped. Another technician looked over. "What about the main charge?" The first technician slowly shook his head. "It didn't separate." Emily saw Officer Reynolds tense immediately. "What does that mean?" The bomb technician answered with chilling honesty. "It means the device is still dangerous." And then, the monitor suddenly filled with static. The robot had stopped responding. It was now sitting less than 3 feet from an armed explosive, completely disabled. A silence settled across the command post. Not the peaceful kind. The kind that came when every trained professional knew the situation had just become far more dangerous. The bomb robot wasn't moving. Its cameras had gone dark. The disruption charge had stopped the visible timer, but it had failed to disable the explosive itself. The senior bomb technician slowly removed his headset. No remote feed. Another technician checked the controls. Trying to reconnect. Nothing. Again, still nothing. Officer Reynolds folded his arms. "So?" The technician answered quietly. "The robot is dead. And the device? We have to assume it's still armed." Emily watched every face around her. Nobody looked confident anymore. The technicians weren't panicking, but neither were they pretending this was routine. One officer finally asked the question everyone had been thinking. Can another robot reach it? The technician shook his head, not without crossing directly over the first one. So what now? No one answered immediately. Finally, the senior technician spoke. I'll have to make a manual approach. Even the officers standing nearby exchanged uneasy looks. Emily knew what that meant. A person walking toward the device. No armor in the world guaranteed survival. Officer Reynolds looked directly at him. You don't have to rush. The technician gave a small smile. If that device has an anti-handling switch, waiting won't make it safer. He calmly opened the rear compartment of the bomb truck. Inside sat the heavy protective bomb suit, nearly 80 pounds, designed to improve survival, not promise it. He began putting it on piece by piece. Helmet, chest protection, leg armor, communication headset, cooling system. Every buckle clicked into place with deliberate precision. Nobody interrupted him. The entire athletic field seemed quieter now. Students sensed something serious was happening. Teachers continued taking attendance, trying to keep conversations normal, trying to make frightened children feel safe. Emily kept moving among them, checking on students with medical conditions, handing out water bottles, treating another anxiety attack. A little boy tugged gently on her sleeve. Miss Carter. She smiled. Yes? Are we in trouble? Emily knelt beside him. No. But there are lots of police. They're here to make sure everyone stays safe. He thought about that. Like superheroes? Emily laughed softly. Something like that. The boy smiled, then ran back toward his class. Officer Reynolds had watched the exchange. He walked over. You haven't stopped working. She shrugged. They still need a nurse. He nodded, then looked toward the school. You know, if you hadn't reported that backpack. He didn't finish. He didn't have to. Emily understood. If she'd ignored it, if she'd assumed someone would eventually claim it, lunch would have continued. Students would have filled those hallways. Hundreds of children, teachers, custodians, office staff, all within yards of the device. The realization sent a chill through her. She quickly pushed the thought away. This wasn't the time. The bomb technician finished sealing his helmet. His voice came through the radio. Beginning approach. Every conversation stopped. He walked alone across the parking lot. Each step looked painfully slow beneath the weight of the protective suit. He disappeared through the west entrance. Inside the building, silence. Outside, hundreds watched from a distance. No one could see him anymore. Only officers wearing communication headsets could hear updates. Entering main corridor, a pause. Proceeding toward target, another pause. Emily found herself holding her breath. Minutes passed, long, heavy, endless. Then, the technician's voice returned. Visual confirmation. Another pause. I'm approximately 15 feet away. Officer Reynolds asked, What do you see? The disruption charge damaged the timer. Main explosive components still intact. Emily saw one of the younger officers quietly close his eyes. Nobody wanted to hear that. The technician continued. I'm checking for secondary triggers. Silence. Then, possible pressure release mechanism. Officer Reynolds frowned, meaning, if the backpack shifts the wrong way, it could detonate. Another long silence. The technician slowly moved closer. 5 feet. 4, 3. Every word over the radio came slower now. Beginning manual inspection. Emily looked across the athletic field. Hundreds of children stood waiting. Some sat on the grass. Others leaned against teachers. None of them knew how close danger had come. Officer Reynolds' radio suddenly crackled. Chief. Another officer spoke urgently. We have surveillance footage. What footage? Parking lot camera. When? About 45 minutes before the package was found. The chief immediately requested the tablet. An officer hurried over carrying it. Emily couldn't help looking. The grainy video showed the east entrance. Students entering, parents dropping off forgotten lunches, delivery drivers, teachers, then a hooded figure. walking calmly toward the hallway, carrying the black backpack. Officer Reynolds leaned closer. "Freeze it." The image stopped. The person's face remained hidden beneath a baseball cap. The backpack matched perfectly. The figure placed it beside the wall, looked both directions, then walked away. No hurry, no hesitation. Gone within seconds. Emily felt her stomach tighten. Whoever had done this had planned it carefully. Officer Reynolds immediately ordered detectives to begin identifying the suspect, but before anyone moved, the radio crackled again. Everyone froze. The bomb technician's breathing sounded louder now. Then came 5 words that made every officer's heart stop. "I found another device." Silence consumed the command post. Officer Reynolds slowly lifted the radio. "Repeat that," the technician answered. "There appears to be a second suspicious package somewhere inside the school. There might not be just one bomb. There might be 2. For a full second, nobody moved. Nobody spoke. Officer Reynolds pressed the radio closer to his face. "Describe it." Static crackled. Then the bomb technician answered. "Smaller than the first. About the size of a lunchbox. Located inside a janitor's storage closet, approximately 20 feet from the main device." Every officer at the command post exchanged worried glances. A second package changed everything. If both devices were connected, disarming one could trigger the other. The technician continued. "I'm not confirming it's explosive, but I'm treating it as live." Officer Reynolds nodded. "Understood." Emily watched detectives immediately begin reviewing additional security footage. Every entrance, every hallway camera, every exterior parking lot feed. If there were 2 devices, perhaps there had been 2 suspects, or perhaps one person had hidden both. The command vehicle buzzed with activity. Meanwhile, across the athletic field, life continued in the strangest way. Teachers read books aloud to frighten first graders. Older students shared bottled water. Some children sat quietly praying. Others simply stared at the school. No one laughed anymore. The uncertainty had settled over everyone. Emily moved from group to group, checking blood pressures, replacing bandages, helping a teacher comfort a student who had started hyperventilating. "You did great getting outside," she whispered. "You're safe now." Those words mattered. Sometimes medicine wasn't an injection. Sometimes it was simply hearing someone say, "You're safe." Officer Reynolds approached again. "I have a question." Emily looked up. "Go ahead." "When you first saw the backpack, did anyone seem interested in it?" Emily closed her eyes, trying to replay every second. Students rushing to lunch, teachers talking, the alarm at the hallway. Then, something surfaced. There was a man. Reynolds leaned closer. "What man?" "I only saw him for a second." "Maintenance?" "I don't think so." "What stood out?" Emily searched her memory carefully. He wasn't looking at the students. He wasn't looking at the exits. He kept looking at me. Officer Reynolds's expression changed. "You're sure?" "I think so." He looked nervous, almost like he expected me to walk past the bag. Detectives immediately wrote it down. One officer hurried back to the surveillance team. Minutes later, a shout came from inside the command truck. "I found him." Everyone crowded around the monitor. The video showed the same hallway. Only this footage came from a different camera angle. The hooded suspect placed the backpack against the wall. Instead of leaving immediately, he stepped behind a vending machine and waited nearly 30 seconds, watching students pass, watching teachers. Then, Emily entered the hallway. The suspect remained perfectly still. She slowed, noticed the backpack, reached for her radio. The suspect reacted instantly. He turned around, walked away, and disappeared through a side exit. Detective Harris pointed at the screen. "He knew." Officer Reynolds nodded slowly. He realized she'd recognized something was wrong. Emily stared at the frozen image. If she'd walked past without reporting it, the suspect might have stayed nearby, watching, waiting. Detective Harris immediately contacted nearby patrol units. "Send this image to every officer. Check traffic cameras, gas stations, bus terminals, everything." The search had officially become a manhunt. Inside the school, The bomb technician continued working. I've completed inspection of the second package. Everyone leaned toward the radio. It appears to be empty. Officer Reynolds blinked. Empty? Correct. No explosive. No triggering mechanism. Just wiring designed to look convincing. Emily frowned. A decoy? Possibly. The technician took another careful look. I believe it was intended to distract responders. Officer Reynolds understood immediately. If we focused on the smaller package, we might lose valuable time on the real one. Exactly. The discovery changed the strategy. Only one live explosive remained, but it was still extremely dangerous. The technician slowly resumed examining the backpack. Several minutes passed. Then, I've located the firing circuit. Nobody interrupted him. I believe I can isolate it. Officer Reynolds asked the question everyone feared. What are your chances? The technician answered honestly. I don't give percentages. Another pause. I either succeed or I don't. Silence followed. Emily looked across the athletic field once more. More than 600 students, teachers, staff, parents, police officers, paramedics. Every single one of them depended on one person inside that building. She realized something. People often celebrated dramatic rescues. The firefighters charging into burning buildings, the officers confronting danger, the pilots making impossible landings. But rarely did anyone think about the professionals whose job demanded absolute patience. One wrong movement, one rushed decision, one careless assumption, and everything could end in an instant. The bomb technician's calm voice returned. I'm beginning final disarmament. Officer Reynolds quietly removed his cap. Without saying a word, several officers beside him did the same. Across the field, a teacher noticed. Then another. Soon, dozens of adults stood silently, waiting, praying, hoping. For nearly 3 full minutes, nothing came over the radio, only static. Then, a single sentence, spoken so calmly it almost didn't seem real. The device has been rendered safe. For a moment, nobody reacted. As if no one trusted what they'd heard, Officer Reynolds pressed the radio. Confirm. The answer came immediately. I confirm. No explosive hazard remains. The words had barely left the speaker before the athletic field erupted. Teachers cried. Students hugged one another. Police officers embraced. Paramedics applauded. Several parents collapsed into tears. Emily closed her eyes. Not because she was exhausted, not because she wanted recognition, but because every child she had cared for, every student she had walked past, every frightened face she had calmed, would be going home that afternoon, exactly as they should. The cheers echoed across the athletic field. Not loud at first, almost hesitant, as though everyone was waiting for someone to correct the announcement. Then reality settled in. Mason, the bomb was gone. The danger had ended. Students hugged teachers. Teachers hugged one another. Police officers who had spent the past 2 hours preparing for the worst finally allowed themselves to smile. Some laughed. Others quietly wiped tears from their eyes. Emily simply stood still. For the first time since lunch had begun, she wasn't thinking about the next patient, or the next emergency, or the next decision. She simply watched hundreds of children standing safely beneath the afternoon sun. Officer Reynolds walked toward her. For several seconds, neither of them spoke. Finally, he extended his hand. You saved a lot of lives today. Emily shook her head. I reported a backpack. You did far more than that. She looked away. I just followed procedure. The officer smiled. Most people say that after they've done something extraordinary. Emily didn't answer, because in her mind, she kept replaying a single moment. The black backpack, the hallway, the choice to stop walking. How small that decision had seemed. How enormous its consequences had become. An hour later, the bomb technician emerged from the school, still wearing most of the heavy protective suit. The crowd broke into spontaneous applause. He looked almost embarrassed. Removing his helmet, he nodded politely before walking toward the command vehicle. Emily intercepted him. I wanted to thank you. The technician smiled. I should probably be thanking you. She looked surprised. For what? If that hallway had still been full of students, He didn't finish the sentence. He didn't need to. They both understood. By late afternoon, the evacuation was officially complete. Parents signed students out one class at a time. School buses transported those whose families couldn't immediately arrive. Counselors met with frightened children. Crisis response teams set up temporary support centers. Medical staff remained available for anyone experiencing anxiety or shock. Emily refused several offers to sit down. She continued helping until every student had either gone home or been safely reunited with family. Only then, nearly 6 hours after she'd first spotted the backpack, she finally returned to the nurse's office, or what remained of it. Evidence markers covered the hallway. Crime scene tape blocked every entrance. Investigators photographed every inch of the corridor. The backpack was gone. Only an empty square on the floor remained where it had once rested. Emily stood there quietly. Officer Reynolds joined her one final time. "The suspect?" Emily asked. He nodded. "We've identified him." She looked up. "He was arrested about 30 minutes ago. Nearby. Trying to leave the county." Emily exhaled slowly. "So it's over. For today." He handed her a small evidence envelope. Inside was her school radio. It had been collected during the investigation. "Oh, we're finished with it," she smiled. "I was wondering where it went." As she clipped it back onto her belt, Reynolds spoke again. "You know what impressed me most?" Emily waited. It wasn't spotting the backpack. It wasn't organizing the evacuation. It wasn't keeping everyone calm. She tilted her head. "Then, what was it?" "You never stopped being a nurse." Emily frowned slightly. "What do you mean?" He looked toward the athletic field, now almost empty. "Even while everyone else focused on the bomb. You were checking blood sugar, treating asthma, comforting scared kids, helping children find their parents. You never forgot why you were there." Emily smiled softly. "I guess I never thought about it." "I know. That's exactly why it mattered." The following morning, news crews gathered outside the school. Headlines spread across the country. "School nurses' quick thinking prevents disaster. Hundreds safely evacuated after suspicious package found. Bomb squad neutralizes explosive at elementary school." Television stations replayed helicopter footage. Security experts analyzed the evacuation. Former law enforcement officers praised the response. Parents flooded social media with messages of gratitude. But inside the school, the attention felt strangely distant. Students weren't talking about bomb technicians, or police radios, or crime scene investigators. They were talking about Miss Carter, the nurse who stayed with them, the nurse who remembered their medicine, the nurse who held frightened hands, the nurse who somehow always knew exactly what to say. A week later, the school held a small assembly. Nothing extravagant, no television cameras, no politicians, just students, teachers, parents, and first responders. The principal stepped onto the stage. "There are moments when heroism looks dramatic." He paused. "And there are moments when it looks like someone simply doing their job with extraordinary care." He invited several first responders onto the stage: police officers, firefighters, paramedics, the bomb technician, finally, Emily Carter. The audience rose together, not because anyone asked them to, because it felt right. The applause continued for nearly a full minute. Emily stood quietly, visibly uncomfortable with the attention. She had never wanted recognition, only the certainty that every child would make it home safely. Most people imagine that heroes are fearless. They imagine courage as something loud, something spectacular, something reserved for soldiers, firefighters, or police officers. But real courage often looks different. Sometimes, it is noticing what everyone else walks past. Sometimes, it is trusting your instincts when others might ignore them. Sometimes, it is refusing to assume that someone else will handle it. And sometimes, it is remembering that even in the middle of overwhelming danger, people still need kindness. They still need reassurance. They still need someone to tell them, "You're safe." On that ordinary school afternoon, one nurse never chased recognition. She never expected headlines. She never thought of herself as a hero. She simply chose to act. One careful observation, one radio call, one organized evacuation, one calm voice. Those ordinary decisions became the reason hundreds of families sat down together for dinner that evening. because heroism is rarely about doing something impossible. More often, it is about doing the right thing at exactly the moment it matters most.